Hey guys, it's me Tiffany and welcome back to my channel. I have an earlier video of me reading 4 classics from 1900 through 1909. Now I've read 4 more classics and these are from 1910 through 1919. So I would like to keep doing videos like this and keep going up by decades. How far in these decades, I'm not fully sure. I don't know if I'll stop at the 90s or early 2000s, but you know, I would like to keep doing this. The idea is fun to me. You get to kind of time travel through books, and I'm trying to keep books that I have not read before because just as an average reader going through school and college, sometimes you're just exposed to random books. Like, I have read books in this decade before, and sometimes you don't realize where they are. You might think they're like 1905 and they're like 1911 because it might be similar. So I am trying to pick books I have not read before. I don't know if that's always going to be a thing because there are some classics I would like to reread, or if I'll do 5 books when those videos come up. I'm unsure, and for the most part, I'm not reading these back to back to back and trying to see what's similar and different. I'm just picking 4 classics that I'll find interesting, and sometimes I do read something in between, but the main thing is I'm trying to read them within a reasonable time period. Like last video, I read them all within about 3.5 weeks, which I'm trying not to take over 6 weeks, but these, I actually read them in I guess 2 weeks, and that was because I did a vlog, which should be uploaded before this video, where I picked a random generator to pick 4 random books I would read, and it'd be like my next 4 books. So those were back to back for the most part, and 2 of these 4 classics that I was planning for this video were on the list. So those 2 books are definitely going to be in more detailed thoughts since I'm keeping these kind of spoiler free. And I put 3 of the 4 on there. And I did change one of those books last minute, which it wasn't picked for that video. It was because my library just never came through with that particular classic, so I changed it at the last minute. So yeah, that was a long intro. So the first book I read was The Secret Garden. This was written by British author Frances Burnett in 1911. It focuses on Mary Lennox. She was living in India during the time that India was being colonized by Britain, and her servant and her parents died during the cholera outbreak, which was deadly at the time. So she was forced to move to England to live with her uncle, which her uncle wasn't really around that much. But it's basically about her being an awful child, becoming a better person, and learning how to navigate through her actual feelings and how to deal with people. She makes a couple of friends, and for the most part, this is like a nice children's classic. So, one thing I really like about this book is the overall theme of this book is healing. She was very neglected by her parents. People were rude to her in school. People didn't take her seriously, and it's nice just to see her heal and become a better person. And her friend Colin also heals as well, which I'll talk about in a minute. Another thing I liked that a way she used to heal was gardening, which The Secret Garden. The premise of the book is she learns that she likes gardening, and she found out that her uncle has hidden away a secret batch of the garden, and she wants it for herself. And she doesn't consciously, because she's like a 10-year-old child, but gardening is used the way that she expresses herself, the way she heals, keeps her mind off things. And I like it in particular because gardening is actually a really healthy hobby for the most part. And I like that instead of just something random happening that makes her heal or whatever, a child's just doing something that she likes, and it ends up being healthy, and it ends up helping her out. And I also think this is a easy to read classic. Some classics, have harder language, even in children's books. Sometimes they are harder to pick up, they're intimidating. And this has very simple language, very easy to read. The plot's pretty concise. There's not really outside of the garden being hidden, there's not like a lot of stuff that I think anybody, even a kid, would have a hard time picking up in today's time, whatever. So, there are some issues with this book, and I didn't know they were in this book before I picked it up. I don't know if that would have changed me picking this novel up or not, but I'm here to discuss it. I'll also discuss it in the vlog because this is the first book that I read for the Random Generator vlog. And the reason why it's first here is just because it was published first. The whole list is based off the order of publication. So the fact that it shows up first twice in 2 different videos is not really anything symbolic. It's just the way it happened. It was also the first book my library had available. This is what it happened. So the first problematic thing of this book is ableism. It is strong in this novel. I have mentioned this in more detail in my vlog, especially with Colin in particular. It kind of has the trope of the magical cure for disability, and that is harmful. Okay, I know that this is a classic. They had different medicine back then, different technologies, different mindsets, Christian Science, all that. And I know hypochondria, and I've mentioned this in my vlog as well, but I'm going to keep it short. I know hypochondriacs are a thing, and they go through, it's just in his brain. Just think about other things and not let things get you down, and you'll get better. And the way the novel does Colin's illness seems to... It kind of makes it seem like he wasn't really ill and he was just either stressed out or being a hypochondriac or something. But even if he was, there are a cause to those things. Like, those things don't... Nobody just wakes up, hey, I'm just gonna pretend this is happening. That's not like a real thing, especially for like a kid for the most part. So I don't like how that is covered. He is neglected. There's a lot of stuff going on with this. His dad hides him away. And there's a lot of stuff that could be a mental thing. It could definitely be physical. He could definitely be sick. But I don't like that he just magically seems to get better, because that's what his brain thinks. And there's like a passage at the end of the book talking about teaching kids basically, don't let life get you down and you'll get better. That's not what really happens. I don't care if his illness is more mental or it's more physical. That is a problematic thing. And I think that's a thing that should be noted before you read this book. So that way you're just not caught off guard with it. And if you do read this to a child, I do think this would be a good discussion to have before reading the book, or when you get to that passage. I don't read to children, so I don't know when would be the best time, but I think that's a conversation to be prepared to have if you were to read this to a modern child, because they won't pick up on that, and you don't want to, give them a problematic mindset that's unhealthy. So another problematic thing about this book is blatant racism. And I've mentioned this in my blog as well and in my Goodreads review. So the reason why I want to mention this is, especially with Americans, a lot of people don't know about the colonization of India that was by the British people, the slavery, all of that. And there are a lot of racist stuff towards Indians at the time. And that happened in both India and Britain. It's not just the colonizers in India. This is also in Britain itself. And it gets pretty bad. And the thing is, I know a lot of classics have random stuff, but you don't expect this in a book about gardening for children. You don't expect that. So it kind of just hits you in the face randomly. And it's not just like sly racism. It is blatant. One of the characters talks about Indians being not even people. It is very, very blatant and very strong. And I think people should know that before they read this, just so they're aware that this is in there. And if they read this to kids, be prepared to have that conversation. That's all I've got to say on the racism thing. I kind of went in a little bit more depth in the vlog, and I'm not trying to just I guess, promote the vlog, but I definitely go into more details like, what the crap, because I wasn't expecting it. Even though this is a problematic text, I do think this can be enjoyed, studied, just read, whatever. That's part of the enjoyed. But especially with studying, this definitely gives you a lot of the mindset of people back then. Just be mindful that these things are in there. Don't ignore the problems that are in this text, and you can still enjoy the charming story of a spoilt child learning how to navigate through her feelings and deal with other people. And just if you read this to other kids or you recommend this to people, just be mindful and let them know, hey, this is in there. Just because something is problematic don't mean you can't enjoy it, but prepared to have those conversations. That's just my opinion. So the second book that I had read was also in that vlog for the random generator picked. This is the last one that's going to be in this video that's for that. And this is the Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man by James Weldon Johnson in 1912. So this was the first fictional autobiography by an African American, and it was originally published anonymously to kind of give it more authenticity and give more of the lore of the narrator never even mentions his name. And so people would think this is a true autobiography, and it explores racial identity through his life and him being of a biracial. And he is white passing. This has so many layers of conversations that are important to have, even still today and historically. I do not think this book is talked about enough. I found this book basically through a website because I saw a book about twins, and one was white passing, one wasn't. And it got me down to a list of other books of like white passing African Americans who blended in with white society. And this is kind of where those types of books or those stories were first published and came from. So I was curious about the author. I'm just going to give some background. He was born in Jacksonville, Florida. He started the first black newspaper. It only lasted a year, but it was the first black newspaper. He became the first African American to pass the bar exam to be a lawyer. He became a diplomat to Venezuela and Nicaragua, and he was picked by President Theodore Roosevelt. And he was also chief executive of the NAACP. That is the background of the author. I think his accomplishments are amazing. He also wrote songs for Broadway with his brother. He's done a lot. So, taking that in, saying that I think this book should be discussed more, there are so many layers of different conversations to have as, culture, life, like just everything. Like, he goes through his life. It's talking about like his school. Like he talked about going to Paris and comparing Paris to America at the time of how they were treating black people in particular. And I just don't get why this book isn't talked about more. It is a short novel. It's just a little over 200 pages, 205 to be exact. And this book, while it is important, it is also very, very well written. It's almost lyrical without, being in verse. Like there are just so many beautiful passages, and it makes sense. He wrote music in real life. Our narrator also talks about his love of music. So it makes sense why that's in there. And I do love the idea that it was published anonymously. As stated before, it was to give more authenticity to the book. And it gives it more mysterious, as I mentioned, that our narrator is never named. His kids are never named. So I like that. Like, I think that was a very awesome thing about this. And so I want to note that this book was written when lynchings were very, very common in the US, even though it was when slavery was over and it was during Jim Crow. And there is a scene of a African American man being burned to death, and it goes into detail. It is important to know about these things, but in case that might be something that is in here. And this was a very amazing read. I want to recommend this book to everybody. There's just so many layers in so few pages, and and it's well written. Like, it's like the total package. So yeah, definitely pick this up if you can. Alright, so the next two books I do not technically own. The other two were library, but my library didn't have these as an option. And this is the one I swapped out, as I mentioned earlier. I technically had The Four Horsemen on the Apocalypse in that vlog. Thankfully, it did not pick it because my library never went off pending. The way my state works is if your current library does not have the book you're looking for, it'll pull from other libraries in the state. And apparently the only one that has an available copy of it, it is closed. So I'm unable to get that. So I bought the next two on Kindle just because my library didn't have it. And technically these are not in copyright anymore, so reading them for free online is okay. But this one, I went ahead and just bought it because it was like 99 cents. And it was Our Little Macedonian Cousin of Long Ago. It was written by Julia Darrow Cowells in 1915. There is not much on her except for her other children books that she wrote. Like, she wrote like Our Little Athenian Cousin, Our Little Spartan Cousin. So I guess that's just what she's into. And it was a fun read. It was a children's book, obviously. And the one I got on Kindle is it's the original story, but they basically, if they could restore images, they put the images in there that they could restore. Some of them they had to leave out, but the context is still there. And apparently she died about 4 years after writing this book. That was all I could find on her. And this was cute. It was only like 78 pages long, and I enjoyed it. It's based off Nurches. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but he was a real person that was with Alexander the Great. I've never heard his name pronounced outside of YouTube videos, so I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And it basically goes through the training of the Greeks at the time and the Macedonians through school, just things they do outside of school. It talked about art a lot, which was important to Greek people. And it was just fun, and it was a very quick read. The language was very simple, straight to the point. The chapters are short. I read it in like one sitting off my phone. And it's interesting to see, like, there was a lot of conversations about whether Macedonians were Greek or as good as Greek people. Apparently, this was a very common conversation back then. I looked it up. There was a lot of stuff between Macedonia and Greeks, even though they come from the same ancestry. But I personally didn't know this. This was history that I knew who Alexander the Great was, but I never looked into him that much, to be honest. And I know all of this is historical fiction, but, just look up a few things if you don't know them. But for the most part, I don't think a child would have a hard time understanding this. And for most adults, they shouldn't either. And I think it's interesting that she based it off Nurches, because, as I said, he was with Alexander the Great. He was most known for his voyage through the Indus River and the Persian Gulf. And apparently he was supposed to rule the area between like Babylon and India, but Alexander the Great died and ruined that. It don't really discuss that in this book, but for people who are like me and did not know much about him, there's some context. I don't have a whole lot to say. It was just cute. It's basically what you expect, just kind of like the daily life of a young boy going through training and stuff. Like, it was fun. It was cute. Okay, so I don't really have too much to say about the next one. It is a short story. I was planning on reading this initially anyways, not just because I just wanted something short, but I have never read anything by this author, and this author's name is very infamous, and it is an H.P. Lovecraft story. I have never read any of his stories before, as I just mentioned. The Beast in the Cave, it was published in 1918 in a journal, and it was okay. He is a blatant racist. I think everybody knows that, but I'm not ignoring that. This story, I think, was like 7 pages long, and he written it when he was 14, but it got published years later. I don't know if it's his first published story or if it was just his first written story that just got published after some other ones. I'm not sure. But this was free to read on Amazon, and it's basically about a man who was with a tour group. He gets separated, he goes in a cave, he gets lost, he hears an animal, and he has to run for his life. That's basically it. And I think the story itself, the atmosphere was very well written. I definitely felt like the sense of dread, and it felt like there was actual stakes. And I do like short stories, but sometimes short stories aren't good at making you care about the main protagonist. And I didn't care about Old Dude. I didn't. Like, you can still be a short story and make you care about the person. This did not do this for me. I don't know if his other stuff have this weakness or not, but that's just kind of how I feel. And yeah, I think I might give H.P. Lovecraft another chance, especially since he's not going to profit off anything I read. But this was just very middle of the road. And I wanted to give him a chance because I love horror, I love suspense, I love all that stuff. And he's basically like, people hold him up to a very high standard because he affected a lot within those genres. And I thought it was just time just to give him a chance. So guys, those are the 4 classics that I have read for this time period. If there's any books published in this time or in the 20s, that's not The Great Gatsby, please let me know in the comment section below. Tell me if you liked these or didn't like these or whatever. Just let me know, and I will see you next time.